The marble lobby of Sterling Tower gleamed under crystal chandeliers, reflecting everything except the man pushing the janitorial cart across its expanse. Marcus Hayes moved with quiet efficiency, his calloused hands gripping the mop handle as he worked around clusters of executives in $1,000 suits. They never looked down. He preferred it that way. The automatic doors hissed open, admitting a wall of frigid December air and Victoria Sterling herself. She swept through the entrance like winter given form, her charcoal Armani coat billowing behind her, heels clicking a staccato rhythm against stone. At 38, she had built Sterling Automotive Group into a global powerhouse, acquiring 17 manufacturers in 5 years. The business magazines called her the Ice Queen. She considered it a compliment. Her gaze barely registered Marcus as she strode past, already barking instructions into her phone. Then she stopped, turned back. Her eyes, cold and calculating, assessed him the way she might evaluate a failing subsidiary. "You." Her voice cut through the lobby's ambient hum. "The janitor." Marcus straightened, meeting her eyes with quiet dignity. He'd learned long ago that looking away invited worse treatment. "Yes, She gestured toward the private parking garage entrance where a gleaming black limousine sat idling. Custom Maybach S-Class, extended wheelbase, worth more than most people's houses. "My driver called in sick, and the backup service can't arrive for 30 minutes. I have a board meeting across town in 20 minutes. She pulled a business card from her purse, flicked it toward him. It fluttered to the ground between them. "Drive me. I'll pay you $200. The executives nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. Marcus felt their attention like heat on his back. He looked at the card on the floor, then at Victoria's face. She hadn't meant it as an insult. She simply existed in a world where some people picked things up and others didn't. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm on shift until 5. Victoria's laugh came sharp and sudden, a sound without warmth. "Of course you are. How silly of me to think you'd have the initiative to seize an opportunity." She turned toward the parking garage, then paused, glancing back over her shoulder. "Tell you what, drive this limo successfully, get me to my meeting on time, and I'll marry you. How's that for motivation?" The watching crowd erupted in polite laughter. Someone whistled. Victoria smiled, clearly pleased with herself, and disappeared through the garage entrance without waiting for a response. Marcus stood motionless for several seconds, then bent to retrieve the fallen card. His fingers, rough from years of manual labor, closed around the embossed paper. He pocketed it without looking and returned to his mop. "Man, she really put you in your place," one of the younger executives muttered, loud enough to be heard. Marcus said nothing. He'd heard worse. The shift ended at 5. Marcus changed out of his maintenance uniform in the basement locker room, pulling on worn jeans and a faded marine sweatshirt. His locker held few possessions: a photo of a dark-haired woman holding a newborn, a small wooden box, and tomorrow's lunch. He touched the photo gently before closing the door. The December evening had turned bitter, wind cutting through his jacket as he walked 3 blocks to the elementary school. Parents clustered around the entrance in expensive cars, engines running, heaters blasting. Marcus joined the pedestrian line. "Daddy." 7-year-old Emma burst through the doors, her backpack nearly as large as she was, dark curls escaping from beneath a knitted cap. She crashed into his legs with the full force of second-grade enthusiasm. "Hey, baby girl." Marcus scooped her up despite her protest that she was too big, breathing in the scent of classroom chalk and apple shampoo. "Good day." "We learned about the solar system. Did you know Jupiter has 7 to 9 moons? That's so many moons, Daddy. Why does Jupiter get so many when we only get 1? Jupiter's bigger. Probably needs more help lighting up the dark." They walked hand in hand toward the bus stop, Emma chattering about planets and playground politics. Their apartment was in the Riverside district, 40 minutes by bus, but Marcus didn't mind. These walks, these conversations, they were the scaffolding holding his world together. Their 1-bedroom apartment occupied the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. Marcus had given Emma the bedroom. He slept on the pull-out couch. The furniture came from thrift stores and curbside finds, but Emma's bookshelf overflowed with volumes from the library, and her small desk held carefully organized art supplies. While Emma worked on homework at the kitchen table, Marcus prepared dinner. Spaghetti, meatballs from the freezer, a salad. Simple food, but Emma never complained. She'd inherited her mother's grace that way. Daddy. Emma looked up from her math worksheet. Mrs. Peterson said the science fair winners get to go to the state competition. Can I enter? I have an idea about. Where are you watching this story unfold from? Drop your location in the comments below. Solar energy and plant growth. I'd need some supplies, but I made a list and it's only $37 if we get stuff from the hardware store instead of the Science Kit website. Marcus dried his hands on a dish towel. $37. That was groceries for 3 days, or the gas bill, or Emma's new winter boots because her toes were cramping in last year's pair. But it was also Emma's eyes bright with possibility, the kind of spark her mother had possessed. Let me see your proposal. Emma produced a carefully handwritten plan, complete with diagrams copied from a library book. She'd even calculated experimental variables. Marcus read it twice, his throat tight. It's brilliant, Em. Yeah, you can do the project. She squealed and launched herself at him, homework forgotten. Marcus held her, this small fierce creature who'd made him capable of impossible things. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, Marcus sat on the couch and opened the wooden box from his locker. Inside, a Medal of Honor, citation dated 7 years ago. A silver star. Purple heart. Combat action ribbon. Underneath, newspaper clippings yellowed with age. Captain Marcus Hayes saves 12 from ambush. Decorated officer receives nation's highest honor. Marine hero returns home. The face in those photos belonged to someone else. A man with purpose and position, with command and certainty. That man had worn dress blues and stood beside his pregnant wife at the White House, shaking the president's hand. That man had believed the hard parts were over. Then came Emma's premature birth. The complications. Sarah's diagnosis, stage 4 cancer, aggressive, inoperable. The choice that wasn't really a choice, military career or the few months he could give his wife, making memories for a daughter who wouldn't remember her mother. Marcus had resigned his commission and taken a medical discharge. The last 8 months with Sarah had been the longest and shortest of his life. She died 2 weeks after Emma's first birthday, leaving behind recordings of bedtime stories and letters for milestone birthdays. Tell her I loved her, Sarah had whispered at the end. Tell her every day. He'd kept that promise. Everything else, the career, the recognition, the identity that came with medals and respect, he'd packed away. Being Emma's father mattered more than being Captain Hayes. The world didn't need another decorated soldier. Emma needed a dad who showed up. Marcus closed the box and returned it to his backpack. Tomorrow he'd work his shift, cash his paycheck, and buy Emma's science fair supplies. Victoria Sterling's mockery would fade into the background noise of his life, forgotten like every other humiliation endured for the privilege of being present. Outside, the city hummed with ambition and achievement. Inside apartment 3C, Marcus Hayes pulled a blanket over his shoulders and closed his eyes, dreaming of a dark-haired woman who'd believed he could be both hero and father, never understanding he'd had to choose. Victoria Sterling's executive assistant delivered the crisis at 7:32 a.m., bursting into her office with uncharacteristic panic. Ms. Sterling, we have a situation. The senator's convoy is arriving in 10 minutes for the facility tour, and the head of security just collapsed. Possible heart attack. Ambulance is en route. Victoria looked up from her tablet, irritation flashing across her features. The senator's visit represented 6 months of lobbying for federal contracts worth $300 million. The tour had been choreographed down to the minute. Facility walkthroughs, demonstration drives, security protocols. Without the security chief coordinating logistics, the whole operation would collapse into amateur hour. Get Thompson from the night shift. Brief him on the protocols. Thompson's in the hospital too. Food poisoning, half the night crew. Ms. Sterling, we don't have anyone who knows the secure route protocols and has the clearance to. Then cancel. Reschedule for next month. The senator leaves for Brussels tomorrow. He won't be back until spring. If we cancel now, Hartman Industries will swoop in before. Victoria stood, her mind already calculating alternatives and finding none acceptable. She'd eaten breakfast with that senator's chief of staff, endured his tedious hunting stories, laughed at jokes that weren't funny. 6 months of strategic groundwork evaporating because a security chief's hot pick today to fail. Where's maintenance? The question came sharp and sudden. Her assistant blinked. Maintenance. What do? The janitor from yesterday. The one in the lobby. Where is he? Marcus Hayes? He should be starting his shift. Ms. Sterling, I'm not sure how a janitor. Find him. Bring him to the executive garage. Now. 10 minutes later, Marcus arrived in his maintenance uniform, tool belt still buckled at his waist. Victoria stood beside the senator's armored limousine, her phone in one hand, frustration emanating like a force field. Behind her, 3 black SUVs idled in formation, drivers waiting. Ms. Hayes, she began. Hayes. No prefix. She waved dismissively. The senator arrives in 3 minutes. My security chief is incapacitated, the backup is hospitalized, and I need someone who can drive this convoy to our testing facility following secure protocols. The route involves 2 highway transfers for potential ambush points that require specific counter-surveillance techniques and coordination with local police escorts. You drive buses, correct? All commercial drivers have defensive training. Marcus looked at the armored vehicle, then at Victoria. I don't drive buses. I'm janitorial staff. Then what do you drive? Not much these days. My daughter and I take public transportation. Victoria's jaw tightened. Of course you do. Forget I asked. Get back to whatever you were. But I did drive convoys. In Kandahar, Baghdad, Kabul. Marcus spoke quietly, almost to himself, weighing whether this exposure mattered against the lives potentially at risk. Dignitary protection, high-value asset transport, IED avoidance, hostile vehicle interdiction, emergency evasion protocols. The parking garage fell silent except for idling engines. Victoria's eyes narrowed. You're military. Was. What rank? Enlisted maintenance now? That's what matters. She studied him with new intensity, her analytical mind recalculating variables. The senator's convoy leaves in 90 seconds. Either you drive or we cancel and I lose the biggest contract of the quarter. Which is it going to be? Marcus thought of Emma's science fair supplies. Thought of the extra shifts he'd need to cover them. Thought of staying invisible versus stepping forward when someone's safety hung in the balance. I'll need the route details and radio frequencies. Security chief's phone should have the operational parameters. Victoria's assistant produced the phone. Marcus scrolled through the files with practiced efficiency, his expression shifting from uncertain to focused. Whatever he'd been before maintenance, it rose to the surface now like muscle memory. The highway transition at Route 55 is exposed. We'll want the police escort to leapfrog ahead. Secure the overpass before we enter the kill zone. Secondary route should be Riverside Drive if we encounter problems. Less traffic, better sight lines. He looked up at Victoria. You have counter-assault teams staged. 2 unmarked vehicles. Communications linked. Good. Keep them separated from the main convoy by 300 yards minimum. If we get hit, they need independence to maneuver. Marcus touched the earpiece the assistant had provided, adjusting the frequency. This is Hayes, communications check. The radio crackled. Voices responded from the escort vehicles, initially uncertain, then increasingly confident as Marcus ran through coordination protocols with military precision. The senator arrived moments later, a silver-haired man with careful eyes and a firm handshake. Victoria made rushed introductions, explaining the situation without mentioning Marcus's employment status. The senator nodded, assessing Marcus the way politicians assess everyone. You know what you're doing, son. Yes, sir. Then let's get moving. The convoy pulled out of Sterling Tower's garage into morning traffic. Marcus drove with calm authority, his hands steady on the wheel, eyes scanning mirrors and intersections with methodical rhythm. In the back, Victoria sat beside the senator, trying to maintain her presentation about manufacturing capacity, while watching the janitor navigate city streets like he'd been doing this his entire life. The first indication of trouble came at the Route 55 transition. Marcus saw it before anyone else, a utility van stopped on the shoulder, hood up, Too clean for legitimate breakdown, positioned exactly where a hostile vehicle would stage. His hand moved to the radio. Lead vehicle. We have a possible situation. You're 11 o'clock, white van. Count to assault teams. Close the gap. Senator. Heads down, please. Victoria's presentation died mid-sentence. The senator ducked without question, his protective instincts honed by decades of death threats. The convoy accelerated smoothly, Marcus's driving precise and controlled. The escort vehicles boxed the utility van, officers approaching with weapons drawn. False alarm. Legitimate breakdown, nervous driver, wrong place at wrong time. But Marcus's early identification, calm communication, and proper protocols had turned potential disaster into managed inconvenience. Victoria watched him through the rearview mirror, her mind racing. The way he'd scanned the environment, the military terminology, the absolute confidence under pressure. This wasn't amateur hour. This was professional-grade expertise wrapped in a janitor's uniform. They reached the testing facility without further incident. The senator climbed out, straightened his tie, and shook Marcus's hand firmly. Outstanding work, son. You've got good instincts. Military background. Some, sir. Well, thank you for your service. Ms. Sterling, I think we'll have plenty to discuss this afternoon. After the senator disappeared into the facility with Victoria's executive team, she remained beside the limousine. Marcus was already heading toward a shuttle that would take him back to Sterling Tower. Hayes. Her voice stopped him. What branch? Marines. Rank. Marcus hesitated. The truth wanted to stay buried. But she'd see through evasion, and somehow lying felt worse than exposure. Captain. Resigned my commission 7 years ago. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss what happens next. Share this with someone who loves a powerful story, and check the description for more tales that will move you. Victoria absorbed this information without visible reaction, but her assistant, standing nearby with a tablet, had already begun typing furiously. Within minutes, search engines would be processing queries. Marcus Hayes, Marine Captain, 7 years ago. Why? Victoria asked. Why maintenance work when you clearly? I have a daughter. She needed a parent more than the Corps needed another officer. Some choices aren't complicated. He walked away before she could respond, leaving Victoria standing beside a limousine in December cold, watching a janitor who drove like a diplomatic security specialist and talked about fatherhood like it was simple mathematics. Her assistant approached cautiously. Ms. Sterling? I found something. Multiple articles from 7 to 8 years ago. Marcus Hayes, Marine Captain, Medal of Honor recipient. There's a White House ceremony, photos with his wife. She paused, scrolling. Oh, his wife died shortly after. Complications from their daughter's birth, then cancer. He resigned to care for them. Victoria took the tablet, studying the photos. The man in dress blues barely resembled the janitor in her building. Same face, different gravity. The woman beside him glowed with health and happiness, pregnant belly visible beneath elegant dress, her hand intertwined with his. He gave up everything, her assistant whispered. The Medal of Honor is, Ms. Sterling, that's the highest military decoration. People build entire careers on that recognition. He just walked away. Victoria handed back the tablet, her expression unreadable. Inside, something uncomfortable shifted, a crack forming in the careful architecture of her worldview. She'd mocked a decorated war hero yesterday, offered him $200 to drive her like he was desperate help, laughed about marrying him as if he represented some prize she'd never claim. The man had stood there with quiet dignity and said nothing, revealed nothing, accepted humiliation because revealing the truth mattered less than maintaining his privacy. Cancel my afternoon, Victoria said quietly. I need to review something. She spent the next 3 hours reading everything available about Captain Marcus Hayes, combat citations, rescue operations, 12 men saved during an ambush despite wounds that should have killed him. The presidential citation praised his extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to his fellow Marines. The photos showed a man transformed by purpose, standing tall in ceremony, medals gleaming. Then, nothing. A brief notice of medical retirement. His wife's obituary, heartbreaking in its brevity. After that, silence. Captain Hayes had vanished, replaced by a ghost pushing a mop through her lobby. Victoria sat in her office as winter darkness fell early, staring at images of a hero who'd chosen obscurity. She'd built an empire by recognizing value, by seeing potential others missed. How had she looked directly at this man and seen nothing? The answer sat uncomfortable in her chest. She'd seen exactly what she'd been trained to see. Status markers. Wealth indicators. Success signals. The maintenance uniform had told her everything she needed to know, except it had told her nothing true. Her phone buzzed. The senator. Contract negotiations proceeding favorably, excellent facility, impressive operation. The day had been a success. Victoria Sterling had won again. But victory felt hollow tonight, haunted by the memory of a man with calloused hands who'd accepted her mockery without protest, driven her convoy with absolute competence, and walked away before she could thank him properly. She pulled up the building's personnel files, found Marcus Hayes' shift schedule. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., janitorial services. $6 above minimum wage, no benefits for part-time employees, no path for advancement. Victoria made a note in her calendar, then closed her laptop and stared out at the city glittering below her office tower. Somewhere in those lights, a Medal of Honor recipient was helping his daughter with homework, the two of them splitting a simple dinner in an apartment that cost more in monthly rent than his weekly paycheck. The Ice Queen felt something unfamiliar. Shame. The crisis came 3 weeks later, sudden and catastrophic in the way disasters often are, arriving on ordinary Thursday afternoon when people were thinking about dinner plans and weekend schedules. Marcus was repainting the executive conference room when the building shuddered. Not earthquake violent, but wrong, the kind of tremor that makes hindbrain instinct scream danger. Then came the sound, metal shrieking, glass shattering, emergency alarms piercing the air. He dropped the paint roller and ran toward the sound, maintenance training overridden by older, deeper programming. The lobby had transformed into chaos. Sterling Tower's decorative steel artwork, a 12-foot sculpture called Ascending, had torn loose from its ceiling mounts and crashed through the central staircase, taking down support beams and creating a collapse that trapped the structure between floors. Screaming. Dust. Smoke from severed electrical lines. Through the haze, Marcus counted. 4 people visible on the ground floor, injured but mobile. 3 more trapped behind twisted metal. And somewhere in the wreckage, a child crying. Security guards shouted into radios, calling for emergency services. Estimated response time, 8 minutes. The electrical fire spreading through exposed wiring gave them maybe 5 before the situation became lethal. Marcus assessed structural stability with practiced eyes, decades of training emerging like second nature. The sculpture had wedged against load-bearing columns, creating temporary stability, but also blocking conventional rescue access. The crying child was trapped in a pocket underneath, protected by chance positioning, but vulnerable to shifting debris. I need a cutting torch from the maintenance shop, 2 fire extinguishers, and everyone not trained in rescue to evacuate now. Marcus's voice cut through the panic, command authority making people obey before conscious thought. You, he pointed at a security guard, get me the building's structural blueprints. The fire department will need them. You, another guard, establish a perimeter. Nobody enters until fire rescue arrives unless I clear them. Who the hell are you? The head of security demanded. Someone who knows what is doing. Move. They moved. Marcus borrowed a radio, coordinating with emergency services while he worked. The cutting torch arrived in 90 seconds, delivered by a wide-eyed maintenance worker who'd never seen the quiet janitor take charge like a battlefield commander. Marcus began cutting through decorative steel, careful to maintain structural balance while creating access. Talk to me, sweetheart, he called toward the crying. What's your name? Sophie. Small voice, terrified. I can't move. It hurts. Sophie, I'm Marcus. I'm coming to get you. Okay? But I need you to stay very still and keep talking to me. Can you do that? Tell me about school. What grade are you? He worked while she talked, cutting through metal with precision, monitoring the sculpture's weight distribution, adjusting his approach as he identified which supports mattered and which were cosmetic. Behind him, Security had evacuated the building except for emergency personnel. Fire trucks arrived, sirens wailing, but the specialized rescue equipment was still en route. "We need to wait," the fire captain said, assessing the situation. "That structure's unstable. If we move wrong, that electrical fire reaches the gas main in 3 minutes," Marcus replied, not looking up from his work. "The child has a leg injury, possible internal bleeding from impact trauma. We don't have time to wait." "I can't authorize." "Then don't authorize. I'm going in anyway." The fire captain studied Marcus for 5 seconds, running calculations about liability and loss, then nodded. "Tell me what you need." They worked together, Marcus directing placement of support braces while he cut through the final barrier. The pocket containing Sophie appeared gradually, a small space formed by chance intersection of steel beams, barely large enough for a 7-year-old body. She lay curled against her mother, who was unconscious but breathing, both protected by improbable geometry. Marcus squeezed through the opening he'd created, his body folding into spaces that shouldn't accommodate a grown man. Combat experience made flexible what civilians thought rigid. He reached Sophie, assessed her injuries with gentle hands, then made the hardest calculation: move her now and risk spinal damage, or wait for proper extraction equipment while fire spread. The smell of smoke made the decision. "Sophie, this is going to hurt, but I need to get you out. Can you be brave for me? Like a Marine?" Something in his chest tightened. "Yeah, sweetheart. Exactly like a Marine." He stabilized her leg, protected her spine with his own body, and extracted her from the wreckage with agonizing care. Fire personnel received her at the opening, transferring her to a waiting stretcher. Marcus went back for the mother, moving faster now but still precise, aware that any mistake could bring tons of steel down on both their heads. He got her out 20 seconds before the support beam he'd been worried about gave way, collapsing the pocket into crushed space that would have killed anyone inside. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share this story with friends who appreciate powerful transformations, and visit the description for more stories that will touch your heart. The paramedics took over, loading patients into ambulances while firefighters contained the electrical blaze. Marcus stood in the lobby surrounded by destruction, covered in dust and blood that wasn't his, hands steady despite adrenaline crash beginning to set in. Then he noticed the cameras. News crews had arrived while he worked, filming everything. The rescue had been broadcast live, picked up by local stations and streaming feeds. Someone shoved a microphone toward his face. "So, that was incredible. What's your name? What's your background? How did you know?" "Marcus Hayes. I work maintenance. Please excuse me." He tried to walk away, but Victoria Sterling stood blocking his path. She'd arrived during the rescue, watched the whole thing, and her expression carried something he'd never seen there before, respect bordering on awe. "Mr. Hayes." Her voice had lost its sharp edge. "Please wait. We need to. I have to file an incident report. Update safety protocols. I really need to. You saved 3 lives today, including a child who would have died if you'd waited for proper equipment. That's not maintenance work." The lobby had filled with people now, emergency personnel, building employees, executives who'd returned after evacuation. All of them watching. All of them hearing. A reporter, more persistent than the others, had done what Victoria's assistant did 3 weeks ago. Searched the internet, found the articles, discovered the truth. Marcus Hayes, former Marine captain, Medal of Honor recipient. "Is that correct, sir? The White House ceremony was 7 years ago. Why didn't anyone know you worked here?" Marcus closed his eyes briefly, the anonymity he'd maintained crumbling in real time. When he opened them, Victoria was looking at him with complete understanding. "Because it doesn't matter," he said quietly. "What I did before doesn't matter. What matters is showing up every day, doing good work, taking care of my daughter. That's all I want." "Your daughter," another reporter called out. "Emma Hayes, age 7? Your wife passed away from cancer. You resigned to care for them. Captain Hayes, how does it feel to be a hero twice, once on the battlefield, once here today?" "I'm not a hero. I'm a father who happened to have training that was useful today. I'm grateful I could help. Now please, I have to make sure my daughter gets picked up from school." He pushed through the crowd, leaving chaos and cameras behind. His phone was already ringing. The school, his supervisor, numbers he didn't recognize. Marcus ignored them all, caught a bus toward the elementary school, and arrived 10 minutes before dismissal to find news vans already parked outside. The story had gone viral. Combat veteran working as janitor risks life to save trapped child. Video clips of the rescue played on every screen, Marcus's calm authority captured in high definition. By the time Emma's class let out, the narrative had solidified. Hidden hero, secret sacrifice, father's love. Emma emerged from the school and spotted him immediately, running forward with her backpack bouncing. Then she saw the cameras and froze, confusion crossing her small face. "Daddy? Why are there so many people?" Marcus picked her up despite her age, shielding her from the cameras. "Just some attention because of something that happened at work. It'll blow over soon. How was your day?" "We learned about ecosystems. Mrs. Peterson said my project is one of the best." "Daddy, why is everyone looking at us?" "They'll stop looking soon. Come on, let's go home." But the attention didn't stop. By evening, the story had spread nationally. By morning, it was international. Decorated war hero living in poverty, working menial job to support daughter, saves lives while billionaire employer remained ignorant of his background. The narrative wrote itself, and every version made Victoria Sterling look worse. Her PR team went into damage control. Sterling Automotive faced immediate backlash. How could you not know? How could you pay a Medal of Honor recipient minimum wage? What does this say about your corporate values? Victoria sat in her office, reading comment after comment, watching the video of Marcus cutting through steel to save a child, and feeling the full weight of her own blindness. She'd offered this man $200 to drive her. Laughed about marrying him like he represented some impossible conquest. Her assistant appeared in the doorway, hesitant. "Ms. Sterling, Channel 7 wants a statement. So does the Times, the Post, and about 40 other media outlets. The board is asking for an emergency meeting." "And there's," she paused. "Someone named Admiral Richardson is holding on line 3. He says he served with Captain Hayes and wants to discuss the situation personally." Victoria took the call. The Admiral's voice carried decades of command and unexpected gentleness. "Ms. Sterling, I'm calling because I saw the news and I need to understand something. How did one of the finest officers I ever commanded end up mopping floors in your building without anyone noticing?" "Admiral, Victoria had no defense. I failed to see him. We all did." Marcus Hayes received the Medal of Honor for running into an ambush to extract 12 men under fire. He took 3 bullets doing it, kept fighting until everyone was safe, then collapsed from blood loss. I've never met anyone with more courage or integrity. When his wife got sick, he resigned to care for her and their infant daughter. Do you understand what that cost him? What he gave up? I'm beginning to. Then understand this. Marcus doesn't want recognition. He wants to be left alone to raise his daughter in peace. Your building happened to have an emergency where his skills mattered. That's coincidence, not destiny. The media circus hurts him more than it helps. If you want to make this right, you'll find a way to stop the attention, not feed it. The Admiral hung up. Victoria sat in silence, the weight of responsibility settling around her shoulders. She'd built an empire by capitalizing on opportunities, by seizing moments that created advantage. But this moment required something different. This required restraint, respect, and a willingness to let someone else control the narrative. She called her PR team. Issue a statement. Say that Sterling Automotive is grateful for Mr. Hayes' heroic actions, that we're reviewing our employee recognition programs, and that we ask the media to respect his privacy and his family's privacy. No interviews. No press conferences. We defend his right to anonymity. But this is a huge opportunity to do it. Now. The statement went out within the hour. It didn't stop the media entirely, but it shifted the conversation. Victoria Sterling, typically hungry for publicity, refusing to capitalize on viral moment out of respect for employees' wishes. That restraint, unexpected from the Ice Queen, earned its own kind of attention. 3 days later, When the news cycle had mostly moved on and the camera crews had abandoned their stakeout of Emma's school, Victoria stood in Sterling Tower's lobby, now repaired and reinforced. She'd commissioned an investigation into the sculpture's failure, inadequate installation specifications, rushed timeline, insufficient safety review. All failures she could fix with policy changes and budget allocation. Fixing her own failure would be harder. Marcus arrived for his evening shift at 7, changed into maintenance uniform, and emerged to find Victoria waiting near the elevators. No cameras. No audience. Just the two of them in the quiet building. "Mr. Hayes, may I have a moment?" He looked tired, the exhaustion of someone who'd endured unwanted fame and simply wanted normalcy back. "Ms. Sterling, I have flaws to clean. I owe you an apology. A real one, not a corporate statement. What I said to you 3 weeks ago was cruel and thoughtless. I judged you based on appearance and position, made assumptions that were completely wrong, and treated you as less than human. You deserved better. Everyone deserves better." Marcus studied her face, finding something he hadn't expected: genuine remorse. "Apology accepted. Can I get back to work now?" "There's more. I'm establishing an employee recognition program, updating our hiring practices to better identify transferable skills from military service, and creating a scholarship fund for children of Sterling employees. Your daughter's science project. If she wins her school competition, the company will sponsor her participation in the state fair. No strings attached." "That's generous. Emma will appreciate it." "It's overdue." And personally, Victoria pulled an envelope from her jacket. "This is my private number. If you or Emma ever need anything, call. Not as employer to employee. As someone who owes you an enormous debt." Marcus took the envelope without opening it. "Ms. Sterling, I don't need." "I know you don't need anything from me. That's precisely why I'm offering. The people who deserve help most are usually the ones who never ask for it." They stood in the empty lobby, the space between them filled with everything unsaid: class and dignity, judgment and grace, the collision of two people from different worlds discovering their shared humanity. Finally, Marcus nodded. "Thank you. For the scholarship fund especially. There are kids in this building who could use that support." He walked away toward the supply closet, returning to the work that had never defined him, but had sustained what mattered most. Victoria watched him disappear around a corner, then returned to her office, carrying the knowledge that everything she'd built, the success, the power, the wealth, had somehow failed to teach her the most basic lesson about recognizing worth. Outside, winter darkness had fallen over the city. Inside Sterling Tower, a janitor worked his shift with quiet competence, while a billionaire sat alone in her penthouse office, wondering how she'd confused status for value and never learned to see. Victoria Sterling hadn't been to therapy in 12 years, believing that successful people solve their own problems. But on this particular Tuesday morning, she found herself sitting in Dr. Chen's office, staring at abstract art and wondering what chain of events had brought her here. "Tell me what prompted this appointment," Dr. Chen said gently. Victoria's polished veneer cracked slightly. "I humiliated someone publicly. Someone who didn't deserve it. And now I can't stop thinking about it." The therapist waited with practiced patience. "He was a janitor in my building. I offered him money to drive me, made a joke about marrying him if he could manage something I thought was beyond his capabilities. I laughed at him." Victoria's voice went hollow. "Then I discovered he was a Medal of Honor recipient. A Marine captain who'd given up everything to care for his dying wife and daughter. He'd been standing right there, and I saw nothing." "What did you expect to see?" "Someone worth seeing." "And what makes someone worth seeing, Victoria?" The question landed like a physical blow. Victoria sat in silence, unpacking a lifetime of assumptions she'd never examined. When she finally spoke, her voice shook. "I grew up in a trailer park outside Detroit. My father worked construction when he could get work, which wasn't often. My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families, came home exhausted and bitter. I remember being 8 years old, standing in some mansion's kitchen while my mother scrubbed someone's floor, and the owner walked past without looking at her. Didn't even acknowledge she existed." Dr. Chen made a note but said nothing. "I swore I'd never be invisible like that. Never be overlooked. So I worked, scholarships, student loans, 80-hour weeks. Built my company from nothing. Every acquisition, every success story, it was proof that I mattered, that I transcended where I came from. And Marcus Hayes. Victoria closed her eyes. I became exactly like that woman in the mansion. I walked past him without seeing. I made him invisible because seeing him would have required acknowledging that his work mattered, that he mattered, and I'd somehow lost the ability to recognize worth that didn't come with a title or salary. What do you think he saw when you walked past? Someone cruel. Someone who judged him exactly the way I'd been judged my whole childhood, except I was on the other side now. I'd become what I hated most. The dam broke. Victoria cried in a therapist's office for 40 minutes, releasing decades of armor she'd built so carefully. The Ice Queen melted into someone fragile and human, someone who'd sacrificed connection for success and didn't know how to find her way back. What do you want? Dr. Chen asked quietly. I want to apologize properly. Not with money or programs or corporate initiatives. Just, Victoria struggled for words. I want him to know that I see him now. I want to see everyone the way I should have been seeing them all along. That evening, Victoria stayed late at Sterling Tower, reviewing employee files. Not for business reasons, but to learn names, read histories, see patterns she'd ignored. The security guard who'd served in Afghanistan. The receptionist working 2 jobs to support her parents. The maintenance supervisor putting 3 kids through college. She'd been blind to everything that mattered. Around 9 p.m., she heard footsteps in the hallway. Marcus, starting his evening shift, paused when he saw her office light on. Their eyes met through the glass wall. Victoria gestured him inside. Mr. Hayes, do you have a moment? He entered cautiously, still wearing his maintenance uniform, the tool belt at his waist carrying everything needed to fix what was broken. If only human repairs were as straightforward. I've been thinking about what happened, Victoria began, then stopped. The prepared speech felt hollow. Actually, that's not true. I've been thinking about why it happened. About me. Marcus remained standing, polite but distant. Ms. Sterling, you don't owe me. Please. Just listen. She took a breath. I grew up poor. Trailer park poor, where people looked through us like we were glass. My mother was invisible to the people she worked for. I built this company because I never wanted to be invisible again. But somewhere along the way, I started making other people invisible. I became exactly what I hated. For the first time, Marcus's expression softened slightly. It's easy to forget where you came from when you're running from it. If you're feeling the emotion of this moment, show some love with a like, leave your reaction in the comments, subscribe for more incredible stories, share this with someone who needs to see it, and explore the description for similar tales of redemption and love. You didn't forget, Victoria said. You walked away from everything and stayed yourself. How? Marcus considered the question, then moved to sit across from her. The barrier of employer and employee dissolved slightly, replaced by 2 people sharing space. My wife, Sarah, was the person who kept me grounded. Before she got sick, I was heading down a different path, career-focused, ambition-driven. The medals and promotions mattered. Then Emma was born premature, and Sarah got the diagnosis, and suddenly none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was being present for every moment I had left with them. That must have been impossible, Victoria whispered. It was the clearest choice I ever made. Sarah told me something during those last months. She said, his voice caught. She said that people would remember my heroism in combat, but Emma would remember whether I showed up for breakfast. Which memory mattered more? Victoria felt tears threatening again. You chose well. I chose what I could live with. The Marines could replace one captain. Emma couldn't replace her father. Marcus looked directly at her. You ask how I stayed myself. I think the real question is, who were you before you started running? The question hit its target perfectly. Victoria saw herself at 8 years old, standing in that mansion kitchen, watching her mother scrub floors. She'd been someone who understood struggle, who saw people's humanity regardless of status. When had she stopped being that person? I was kinder, she said finally. Before the running, I was much kinder. You can be that person again. It's never too late to stop running and figure out where you actually wanted to go. They talked for 2 hours. Victoria shared stories she hadn't told anyone. The shame of free lunch tickets, the humiliation of wearing Goodwill clothes, the burning determination to never be powerless again. Marcus listened without judgment, then offered his own history, the pride of the uniform, the brotherhood of the Corps, the shattering loss that had redefined everything. After Sarah died, I spent months angry, Marcus admitted. Angry at God, at cancer, at a world where good people suffer for no reason. Emma saved me from that. She'd wake up asking about breakfast or singing songs her mother had taught her, and I realized she needed me to be okay. So I decided to be okay. That's extraordinary strength. No, that's just fatherhood. You do what needs doing. He paused. Ms. Sterling. Victoria. Please. Victoria, I appreciate the apology. It means something, coming from someone who doesn't have to say sorry for anything. But you don't need my forgiveness. You need your own. The words landed with unexpected force. Victoria had spent weeks trying to make amends, launching programs and changing policies, all to earn absolution from a man who'd already forgiven her. But she hadn't forgiven herself. I don't know how, she confessed. Start by seeing people again. Really seeing them. The way you saw yourself when you were 8. Marcus stood, preparing to return to his shift. Victoria stood too, suddenly desperate to maintain the connection, this moment of genuine humanity in a life full of transactions. Would you, she hesitated. Would you let me take Emma to the science fair? Support her project properly? Not as charity, but because Victoria struggled for honesty. Because I'd like to know her. Because she sounds remarkable, and I've spent so long avoiding remarkable people who didn't fit my narrow definitions. Marcus studied her for a long moment, weighing risks and possibilities. Finally, let me talk to her. See if she's comfortable with it. Emma's cautious about strangers after all the media attention. Of course. Thank you. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Victoria? That woman in the mansion who ignored your mother? She probably had her own story, her own reasons for building walls. Understanding that doesn't excuse cruelty, but it helps explain it. Maybe cut yourself some slack while you're figuring out who you want to be. After he left, Victoria sat alone in her office, staring at the city lights. She'd built an empire from those lights, conquered heights she'd never imagined reaching. But tonight, in conversation with a janitor who'd once commanded Marines, she'd found something she'd lost decades ago. The possibility of redemption. Her phone buzzed. Emma's school had sent her an invitation to the science fair as one of the project sponsors. Victoria accepted immediately, then began making plans. Not corporate sponsorship plans or PR opportunities, but genuine support, arranging for professional judges, securing quality materials, ensuring every child participating felt valued. The Ice Queen had started melting weeks ago when she watched a decorated veteran risk his life for strangers. Tonight, in the privacy of her office, the final walls came down. Victoria Sterling cried again, but this time the tears felt like thawing, like something frozen finally warming back to life. Somewhere 3 floors below, Marcus cleaned offices and thought about the woman who'd humiliated him publicly, and then shown the courage to admit she was wrong. He'd met commanders who couldn't admit mistakes, soldiers who'd rather die than show weakness. Victoria's breakdown had taken more courage than most combat he'd witnessed. Maybe, he thought, everyone deserved the chance to become who they were supposed to be. Even billionaires who'd forgotten how to see people. Especially them. His phone buzzed. Emma, texting from her friend's house where she was sleeping over. Did you tell the lady about my project? Is she nice? I looked her up and she seems kinda scary, but also she has a really cool car. Marcus smiled and typed back, she's less scary than she seems. Turns out we all are when you get to know us. Outside, winter had begun giving way to early spring. The city felt different somehow, full of possibility instead of just ambition. In Sterling Tower, 2 people from radically different worlds had found unexpected common ground. The understanding that worth has nothing to do with what you've achieved and everything to do with who you choose to be when no one's watching. And sometimes, if you're lucky, someone sees you anyway and decides you're worth knowing. Asterisk asterisk, approximately 1,860 words, asterisk asterisk. Chapter 5, Romance and Happy Ending. The elementary school gymnasium had been transformed into a laboratory of childhood ambition. Science fair projects covered every available surface, erupting volcanoes, solar system mobiles, elaborate diagrams explaining everything from plate tectonics to the life cycle of butterflies. Parents milled about with cameras, teachers supervised with tired patients, and Emma Hayes stood beside her exhibit with barely contained excitement. Her project, Solar Energy and Plant Growth Variables, occupied a corner table with professional quality displays Marcus couldn't have afforded without Victoria's support. Not just financial support. She'd connected Emma with a botanist from a local university, who'd helped refine the experimental design, then stepped back to let Emma do the actual work. Victoria arrived at 6:30, dressed down in slacks and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back casually. She'd learned from Marcus that Emma responded better to approachability than power, and tonight wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about watching a 7-year-old defend her hypothesis to skeptical judges. "Ms. Sterling." Emma waved enthusiastically, then remembered her manners. "I mean, Victoria. Look, the judges are coming to our section soon. Do I look okay? Does my poster board have any mistakes? Daddy checked it 17 times, but maybe there's." "You look perfect," Victoria said warmly. "And your project is brilliant. Just explain it exactly like you explained it to me last week. Tell the story of what you discovered." Marcus stood slightly apart, letting Victoria and Emma have their moment. Over the past 6 weeks, something unexpected had developed. Genuine friendship between his daughter and the woman he'd once considered cold and untouchable. Victoria had started joining them for Saturday morning breakfast at a diner near their apartment, initially awkward but gradually relaxing into someone who asked Emma about school and actually listened to the answers. The transformation had been profound. Victoria still ran Sterling Automotive with fierce competence, but she'd started arriving home at reasonable hours, leaving her phone in her purse during meals, remembering that business could wait while people couldn't. Her executive team had noticed the change and privately celebrated. The Ice Queen had thawed into someone whose success included humanity instead of excluding it. The judges arrived at Emma's table, 3 professionals with clipboards and encouraging smiles. Emma launched into her presentation with confidence, explaining her methodology, showing her data collection charts, discussing the implications of her findings. She stumbled slightly on a statistical analysis question, but recovered quickly, admitting what she didn't know instead of bluffing. "That's excellent scientific thinking," one judge said, making a note. "Knowing the limits of your data is just as important as the data itself." Emma beamed. After the judges moved on, she turned to Victoria and Marcus, practically bouncing. "Did I do okay?" "I think I did okay." The tall judge smiled when I talked about photosynthesis rates. "You were magnificent," Victoria assured her. "Win or lose, you should be incredibly proud." They wandered the fair while waiting for results, Emma providing enthusiastic commentary on every project. Marcus watched Victoria engage with his daughter, asking questions, offering encouragement, treating Emma's scientific interest with the same seriousness she'd bring to a board meeting. This wasn't performance or obligation. Victoria genuinely enjoyed Emma's company. And somewhere in the past 6 weeks, Marcus had started looking forward to Victoria's presence in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude. The way she laughed at Emma's jokes. The focused attention she gave when Emma explained complicated concepts. The kindness she'd started showing not just to them, but to everyone. The diner's waitstaff, the parking attendant, the security guard at her building whose name she'd finally learned. "Mr. Hayes." A teacher touched his arm. "They are announcing the winners." The gymnasium quieted as the principal took the microphone. 3rd place, 2nd place, then 1st place in the 4th through 6th grade category goes to Emma Hayes for her study of solar energy and plant growth variables. Emma shrieked and ran for the stage, accepting her ribbon with a smile that outshone every light in the gymnasium. Marcus felt his throat tighten, seeing Sarah's joy reflected in their daughter's face. Victoria stood beside him, discreetly wiping her eyes. "She's so much like her mother," Marcus said quietly. "Sarah must have been extraordinary." "She was. And she'd have liked you, I think, once you'd stopped running." Victoria laughed through tears. I hope so. I'm trying very hard to be someone worth liking these days. Emma returned with her ribbon, launching herself at Marcus first, then surprising Victoria by hugging her just as fiercely. We won. We're going to state finals. This is the best night ever. They celebrated at the diner, Emma's ribbon displayed prominently on the table, her excitement filling every pause in conversation. Marcus watched Victoria interact with his daughter, seeing something he hadn't expected to see: family. Not replacement family or substitute family, just family. People who chose to care about each other for no reason except that caring felt right. After Emma fell asleep in the car on the drive home, Marcus carried her upstairs while Victoria waited by her vehicle. She'd offered to drive them, and Marcus had accepted, the boundaries between employer and friend having long since dissolved. When he returned, Victoria was leaning against her car, looking up at the apartment building. "It's nice," she said. "Your neighborhood reminds me of where I grew up, actually, before I started running towards something shinier." Marcus joined her, the spring night mild and promising. "You can't run forever. No. Eventually you have to stop and figure out where you actually wanted to go." Victoria turned to face him. "Marcus, she paused, gathering courage that came easier in boardrooms than in vulnerable moments. "I've been thinking about something you said. About choosing what you can live with. I remember. I've built a life I can tolerate, but not one I can live with. Not really. Everything I achieved, it's empty when I go home to a penthouse with no one in it. I'm successful and lonely, and I spent so long believing those were unrelated that I forgot they are not." Marcus waited, sensing she needed to finish. "Then I met you, and Emma, and I remembered what I'd forgotten, that people matter more than achievements. That showing up matters more than showing off. That the best parts of life have nothing to do with quarterly earnings or market share." Victoria's voice shook slightly. "You've both given me something I didn't know I needed. Purpose beyond profit. Connection beyond transactions." "Victoria, I'm not finished." She smiled nervously. 6 weeks ago, I made a stupid joke about marrying you if you could drive a limousine. It was cruel and thoughtless, and I've regretted it every day since. But lately I've been thinking," she paused. "What if I asked you properly? Not as a joke or a challenge, but as a genuine question from someone who's fallen completely in love with you and your daughter and the life you've built from tragedy." Marcus felt the world narrow to this moment. Victoria styling, vulnerable and hopeful, offering something real instead of transactional. "I know it's fast," she continued. "I know we're still learning each other. But I've spent my whole life playing it safe, building walls, protecting myself from ever being hurt or overlooked. And I'm tired of safe. I want to choose something brave instead. I want to choose you." The silence stretched between them, full of possibility. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Do you remember what you said to me that day? Drive this limo and I'll marry you." Victoria winced. "I remember. I'm so sorry I drove the limo." She blinked, confused. "When the senator needed transport, I drove. You made a challenge, and I met it. So technically," Marcus smiled, something playful emerging, "technically, you owe me a wedding." Victoria laughed, the sound bright and unrestrained. "Is that a yes?" "That's a let's figure this out together. Emma needs to be part of this decision. We do this as a family, or we don't do it at all. I wouldn't want it any other way." They stood together in the parking lot of Marcus's modest apartment building, worlds colliding in the best possible way. Victoria had come here seeking redemption and found love instead. Marcus had been hiding from recognition and found someone who saw him completely, not the hero or the janitor, but the man underneath both titles. "Fair warning," Marcus said. "I'm a single father with PTSD, a medal I never talk about, and an apartment full of second-hand furniture. I have no idea how to navigate your world. Fair warning, I'm a workaholic billionaire with control issues, a traumatic childhood, and a penthouse that's basically a hotel room. I have no idea how to navigate your world either." Victoria moved closer. "But maybe we can learn together. Maybe that's the point." Marcus kissed her then, gentle and certain, sealing a promise that had started with humiliation and transformed into something neither of them had expected: genuine partnership. 3 months later, In a ceremony that made headlines for all the right reasons, Victoria Sterling married Marcus Hayes in the elementary school gymnasium where Emma had won her science fair. No expensive venue, no elaborate production, just family, friends, and a 7-year-old flower girl who'd given her enthusiastic blessing to the union. Emma had been consulted extensively about the wedding, her opinion weighted as heavily as the adults. She'd interviewed Victoria with second-grade thoroughness. Will you read me bedtime stories? Will you come to my school plays? Do you promise not to work during dinner? Victoria had answered every question honestly, including the hardest one. Are you going to replace my mummy? No, sweetheart. Nobody replaces people we love. Your mom will always be your mom, and she'll always matter. I'm just hoping to be someone else who loves you, if that's okay. Emma had considered this carefully, then announced, okay. But you have to learn to make pancakes. Daddy's pancakes are terrible. I can work with those terms. The wedding ceremony was simple and perfect. Marcus wore his dress blues at Victoria's request. She wanted everyone to see the man she'd failed to recognize, the hero who'd chosen fatherhood over glory. Victoria wore a dress her mother had helped her pick out, healing their relationship in the process. When the officiant asked about vows, Marcus and Victoria had written their own. I vow to see you, Marcus said, his voice steady. To really see you, even when you're hiding behind armor or achievements. To remind you that your worth has nothing to do with what you've built and everything to do with who you are. Victoria's tears fell freely. I vow to show up. To be present instead of busy, connected instead of distant. To remember that the most important things in life aren't measured in quarterly earnings but in breakfast conversations and science fair ribbons and moments like this. Emma stepped forward with the rings, beaming with importance. And I vow to keep you both honest and make sure you don't work too much and remember that Jupiter has 7 to 9 moons because that's really important. The crowd laughed. Victoria pulled Emma into the ceremony, making it clear this wasn't just a marriage between two people, but the formation of a family that had been broken and lost and was now finding wholeness. A year later, they'd settled into rhythms that worked. Victoria had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Sterling Automotive, transitioning to chairman of the board and using her time to champion causes that mattered: veteran support programs, childhood education initiatives, workplace dignity reforms. Marcus had accepted a position training corporate security teams, using his military expertise without sacrificing time with Emma. They lived in a house that split the difference between Victoria's penthouse and Marcus's apartment, comfortable but not excessive, warm and full of life. Emma thrived, her science projects growing more ambitious, her confidence blooming under the attention of two parents who showed up for every milestone. She'd started calling Victoria by a nickname she'd invented, V-Mom, distinguishing her from Mom whose memory stayed sacred through photos and stories and videos Sarah had recorded. On Sunday mornings, they had a ritual, breakfast at the same diner where Victoria had first started learning to be human again. Marcus made Emma laugh with terrible jokes. Victoria discussed scientific concepts with the seriousness Emma deserved. The waitstaff knew their order, greeted them warmly, treated them like the family they'd become. This particular Sunday, as they finished pancakes and Emma colored on the paper placemats, Victoria looked across the table at Marcus and felt something she'd never experienced in her previous life: contentment. Not the hollow satisfaction of closing a deal or beating quarterly projections, but deep, bone-level peace. What are you thinking? Marcus asked, reading her expression. I'm thinking about how I almost missed this. How close I came to spending my whole life running towards something that didn't matter. But you stopped running. You taught me how to stop. Victoria reached across to take his hand. You and Emma both. You taught me that worth isn't earned through achievement. It's recognized through attention. And you're worth all the attention I have. Emma looked up from her coloring. Are you guys being mushy again? Because it's cute but also kind of gross. They laughed. Marcus pulled Emma close, Victoria leaning into both of them. This found family assembled from tragedy and cruelty and the surprising grace of second chances. Outside, the city moved at its relentless pace, full of ambition and achievement and people running toward futures they'd mapped in quarterly projections. Inside the diner, a former Marine captain, a reformed billionaire, and a 7-year-old scientist sat together over pancakes, proving that the most important things in life couldn't be measured by any metric that mattered to the world. They'd both been broken in different ways, Marcus by loss, Victoria by ambition. They'd both been invisible, Marcus by choice, Victoria by her own blindness. But they'd found each other in a moment of humiliation that became recognition, cruelty that transformed into understanding, and separation that dissolved into love. Years later, when Emma graduated from college with honors in environmental engineering, she'd give a speech thanking her parents, both of them, the one who'd given her life and the one who'd chosen to be part of it. She'd talk about the importance of seeing people's worth regardless of their titles, about the courage it takes to admit you're wrong, about the strength required to choose vulnerability over armor. But that was years away. For now, on this ordinary Sunday morning, they were just a family sharing breakfast, telling stories, planning their week. Marcus had taught Victoria how to stop running. Victoria had taught Marcus that hiding didn't equal safety. Emma had taught them both that love expands to include everyone brave enough to show up. The waitress refilled their coffee, smiling at the easy warmth between them. You folks are my favorite Sunday regulars. There's something special about watching people who clearly choose each other every single day. Victoria caught Marcus's eye, remembering the moment she'd offered him $200 to drive her. Remembering her cruel joke about marriage, never imagining it would transform into genuine love. Remembering the man pushing a mop who turned out to be everything she'd been looking for without knowing she was looking. Yes, Victoria said softly, still holding Marcus's hand while Emma colored beside them. We choose each other. Every single day. Outside, spring sunshine turned the city golden. Inside the diner, 3 people sat together in perfect contentment, proof that redemption wasn't found in achievement, but in the simple, profound act of seeing another person completely, and choosing to be seen in return.